Hello? Tonight, we open an old case file, but one that has never rested. Our first piece of evidence is Exhibit A, displayed in a climate-controlled case in every major museum in the world, a set of canopic jars. They are beautiful, carved from alabaster or stone, their lids fashioned into the heads of the four sons of Horus, a human, a baboon, a jackal, and a falcon. We are told they contain the mummified liver, lungs, stomach, and intestines of the deceased. The brain, we know, was unceremoniously scrambled, liquefied, and discarded through the nose, considered useless stuffing. But this exhibit is defined by an absence. There is one organ missing, the heart. It wasn't put in a jar. It wasn't discarded. It was left carefully, purposefully, and terrifyingly inside the mummy's chest cavity. The Egyptians, it seems, knew something we often forget. You can live without your brain, but you cannot be judged without your heart. And judgment was the entire point. You may not want to be there when the truth surfaces. Before we continue, please like and subscribe. Only if you truly enjoy this investigative storytelling style. Tonight's file is on the most terrifying job interview in history. What are your hypotheses? Why was the heart the one organ left behind? And what was it expected to do? Dim the lights, open your skeptical eyes, and enter the case file, the common fact, the one that defines our understanding of this civilization, is that mummification was essential for the afterlife. The Baal, or soul, needed to recognize its ka, or physical form, to be reborn each day. This is true. But this preservation was not a guarantee of eternal life. It was merely the preservation of evidence. It was an entry ticket to a courtroom. Our investigation begins with the Book of the Dead, which is not a single book at all. It is a modern name for a collection of ancient papyrus scrolls, custom made for the deceased, containing a series of spells, hymns, and instructions. It is, in essence, a travel guide and a cheat sheet for navigating the Duat, the perilous, terrifying underworld. The journey was filled with monstrous demons, gates of fire, and gods who had to be flattered or tricked. But this entire journey, all this magic, was leading to one final, inescapable moment. This is the odd, lesser-known detail that changes the entire case file, the centrality of the heart. The Egyptians believed the heart, or Ib, not the brain, was the source of all intelligence, emotion, memory, and will. It was the single, incorruptible witness. It was the hard drive that had meticulously recorded every single action, every thought, every lie, every kindness, every cruelty a person had ever committed. And while the mouth might lie, the heart could not. The embalmers left it in the body because it was not the property of the deceased. It was the property of the court. The entire purpose of mummification, the prayers, and the Book of the Dead was to successfully guide the soul to the Hall of Two Truths to stand trial before the great god Osiris. The jackal god Anubis would lead the soul into the chamber. 42 terrifying divine judges would sit, waiting to hear a confession. And in the center of the room, there was a set of golden scales. This was the moment of judgment. Historians still debate whether the average Egyptian viewed this trial as an inevitable, terrifying moral reckoning, or if the Book of the Dead itself is evidence of a deep-seated cynicism. Was this a guide to pass the test, or a magical toolkit to cheat it? Was the goal to be a good person in life, or was it simply to purchase the correct spells to silence your own conscience when it was placed on the scales. The evidence for this magical cheat is one of the most unsettling items we've ever found in a tomb. But before the scales, the soul had to first face the jury. The soul, guided by the steady hand of the jackal god Anubis, has navigated the terrors of the duat. It now stands at the threshold of the most important room in all of eternity, the Ma'ati, the Hall of Two Truths. The common fact depicted in every major book of the dead papyrus is that this is the divine courtroom where the deceased will stand trial before Osiris, the king of the underworld. This is not a suggestion. It is a mandatory, non-negotiable appointment. The room is vast, silent, and filled with a divine, terrifying audience. This is the jury. This is the odd, lesser-known detail that forms the basis of this entire investigation. The jury consists of 42 divine assessors, or judges. Each of these terrifying, often animal-headed gods represents one of the 42 nomes, or provinces, of Egypt, and each one is the divine specialist for a single, specific sin. This was not a general trial of one's goodness. It was a precise 42-point legal inspection. And here, the deceased must speak. They must stand before this tribunal of gods and perform the centerpiece of the trial, a speech known as the negative confession. This is a profound legal and psychological concept. The soul does not confess what it has done. It must, one by one, address each of the 42 judges by name and declare a specific sin it has not committed. The soul must state, "I have not murdered. I have not stolen. I have not been greedy." These are the ones we would expect. But the list, as recorded in the papyri, goes so much deeper, revealing the true moral fabric of ancient Egypt. The soul must swear, "I have not made anyone weep. I have not been an eavesdropper. I have not spoken with anger. I have not polluted the water. I have not been arrogant. I have not spoken ill of the king." This is a complete psychological and social audit. The gods were not just concerned with crimes of action, but crimes of emotion, anger, crimes against social harmony, making someone weep, eavesdropping, and even crimes against the environment, polluting the water. The soul is, in essence, presenting a perfect, unblemished life, daring any of the 42 judges to object. Historians still debate the true nature of this confession. Was this a genuine moral checklist? A set of 42 commandments that the average Egyptian tried to live by, in hopes of one day reciting them with a clear conscience? Or was this a purely magical act? Was the spell itself the key? If you purchased a book of the dead from the priests, and you recited this negative confession perfectly, using the correct magical intonations, did it magically make you innocent? Was this a guide for living a moral life, or a magical script guaranteed to beat the system regardless of the life you actually lived? The soul has now given its verbal testimony. It has pleaded not guilty on all 42 counts. The 42 judges have heard the plea, but this is only the first half of the trial. Now, the court must verify the testimony. It is time to call the one witness that cannot be charmed, tricked, or lied to: the heart, the preserved conscience we identified in Section 1. The verbal defense is over. It is time to weigh the physical evidence. The verbal testimony is over. The soul has stood before the 42 divine judges and recited the negative confession we investigated in Section 2, pleading not guilty to a lifetime of potential sin. The great hall of two truths is silent. The judges have heard the plea. Now, they must see the proof. This is the moment for the cross-examination, the verification of the evidence. It is time to call the one silent witness that cannot be charmed, tricked, or bribed, the heart. The common fact, the image that is the absolute centerpiece of the entire Book of the Dead, is what happens next. The jackal-headed god Anubis, who guided the soul into the hall, now steps forward to perform his most critical role. He is the court's technician. He moves to the great golden scales that stand in the center of the chamber. With divine precision, he takes the heart of the deceased, the IB, the preserved conscience that was purposefully left inside the mummy from section 1, and places it on one of the golden pans. On the other pan, he places a single pure white ostrich feather. This is the feather of Ma'at. Ma'at is not simply a goddess. She is the fundamental concept of truth, justice, cosmic order, and balance. This is the ultimate test. The heart, the vessel containing the weight of every deed, thought, and secret from an entire lifetime, is to be weighed against the single, absolute, unyielding weight of truth. This is where our modern, romanticized interpretation often fails. This is the odd, lesser-known detail that changes the nature of the trial. We often hear that the heart must be as light as a feather. This is a critical misunderstanding. The feather is not weightless. The feather represents the ideal weight, the perfect standard of a life lived in harmony with Ma'at. The goal was not to have a light heart, which might imply a life of no action, no substance. The goal was balance. The heart had to weigh exactly the same as the feather. This was a divine polygraph test. When the soul recited the negative confession, it was a verbal claim. The weighing was the verification. If the soul had lied, if it had said, "I have not stolen," when its heart knew it had, the heart, heavy with that sin, that lie, and that arrogance, would sink the pan. That was failure. Conversely, some texts imply a heart too light was also a failure, a sign of a life unlived, a person without will or substance. The scales demanded a life of active, moral balance. Historians still debate the precise psychological nature of this judgment. Was this, for the average Egyptian, a literal, physical post-mortem event they genuinely expected to endure? Or was it a sophisticated and powerful psychological metaphor, a way to visualize and teach a life of moderation and moral integrity? The sheer amount of magic and effort the Egyptians poured into passing this specific test suggests they were taking it with terrifying literalness. Beside the scales stands Thoth, the ibis-headed god of wisdom and writing. He is the divine court clerk, holding his reed pen and papyrus palette, his eyes fixed on the needle of the balance, ready to record the official eternal verdict. Anubis watches. The 42 judges watch. Osiris, king of the dead, watches from his throne. The entire pantheon holds its breath, and in the shadows, something else is watching too. A creature, waiting patiently, its gaze locked not on the soul, but on the scales, waiting for the needle to tip. The Hall of Two Truths is frozen in a moment of absolute tension. The 42 judges are silent. Osiris watches from his throne. The soul of the deceased stands helpless. The jackal god Anubis has stepped back from the scales. Thoth, the divine clerk, leans in, his ibis head silhouetted, his reed pen poised just above his papyrus, his eyes fixed on the needle. The heart, containing a lifetime of sin, sits on one pan. The feather of truth, Ma'at, sits on the other. This is the ultimate binary test, and everyone in the hall is watching the scales. But the soul is watching the creature that sits beside the scales. The common fact, the one depicted in every book of the dead papyrus, is the presence of this monster. Her name is Ammit, a name that means the devourer or eater of the dead. She is the court's terrible mascot, a creature of pure nightmare, deliberately designed to be the sum of all Egyptian fears. Her head is that of a crocodile with jaws built to crush. Her front half is the body of a lion, the most powerful land predator. Her back half is that of a hippopotamus, a creature the Egyptians knew not as a comical, lumbering beast, but as a territorial, boat-smashing, and utterly homicidal killer. This is Ammit. She is the physical manifestation of divine retribution, and she sits patiently, attentively, at the foot of the scales. Her gaze is not on the soul, it is on the heart. This is where the case file opens on the true, terrifying nature of Egyptian cosmology. This is the odd, lesser-known detail. We, with our modern inherited concepts of judgment, see Ammit and we assume we know her role. We see a demon. We assume she is the warden of hell, that she is there to drag the guilty soul away to an eternity of fire and torment. This is a profound misreading of the evidence. Ammit is not here to punish. She is here to annihilate. The Egyptians did not have a hell in our sense of the word, no fiery pit of eternal conscious suffering. To them, the ultimate terror, the only real terror, was non-existence. Their entire civilization, the mummies, the tombs, the magic, the 3,000-year-long project, was a war against forgetting. It was a desperate, brilliant, and obsessive quest to achieve eternity. Ammit was the personification of the alternative. She was the void. Her role was not to torment, but to erase. If the scales tipped, if Thoth's pen recorded a heart heavy with sin, Ammit would lunge forward. She would open her crocodile jaws, and she would devour the the heart. In that single final act, the soul was gone, not tortured, deleted. This was the second death, a complete cessation of consciousness, memory, and being. Your name would be wiped from the rolls of eternity. You would not just be dead, it would be as if you had never, ever existed. This was a fate worse than any fire. Historians still debate the precise theological function of this act. Was this a genuine, terrifying belief in oblivion? Or was Ammit a later, more literal personification of an older, more abstract concept of failure? Was she a bogeyman for the masses? A way for the priesthood to simplify the complex idea of Ma'at into a tangible, terrifying monster that could scare the population into moral compliance? The evidence of her composite nature, a greatest hits of apex predators, suggests a very deliberate psychological creation. She is not a chaotic demon. She is part of the divine order. She is the court's sanitation system, the necessary mechanism for destroying what was unbalanced and untrue to keep the afterlife, the field of reeds, pure. She sits and waits. She is the embodiment of the trial's stakes. The soul, standing in the hall of two truths, is not risking pain. It is risking everything. The scene is set. The heart is on the scales. The feather of truth is opposite. The Foras judges have heard the plea. Thoth, the divine clerk, is ready to write. And Ammit, the devourer, is waiting, as we saw in Section 4, for the smallest imbalance. This is the moment of the verdict, and it is brutally, terrifyingly binary. There is no middle ground, no plea bargain, no appeal. The common fact, the one that fills the book of the dead with hope, is the first outcome. The scales balance. The heart, after a lifetime of action, is found to be in perfect equilibrium with Ma'at. It is not heavy with sin, nor is it weightless. It is true. Thoth, the ibis-headed scribe, records this perfect balance on his palette. He looks to Osiris, the great judge, and announces the verdict, Ma Keru. True of voice. The 42 assessors approve. Osiris, from his throne, accepts the verdict. The soul has passed the test. It is now a justified soul. It is at this moment that the god Horus takes the deceased by the hand and leads them forward to be presented to Osiris, to be welcomed not as a defendant, but as a new member of the divine world. The soul has achieved eternity. It is granted access to the afterlife, a paradise known as the Aru, or Field of Reeds. This was the goal. The Aru was not a cloudy, ethereal heaven. It was a perfect, idealized, eternal Egypt. It was a fertile land by a branch of the celestial Nile, where the sun always shone, the crops always grew 7 cubits high, and there was no sickness, no hunger, and no death. The justified soul would be given a plot of land and would live forever, feasting, loving, and existing in a state of perfect, unchanging bliss. This was the reward. Then there was the alternative. This is the odd, lesser-known detail that defines the terror of this trial. The second outcome, the scales tip. The heart, heavy with a single lie spoken to the judges, or heavy with a lifetime of unconfessed greed, arrogance, or cruelty, sinks. It is heavier than the feather. It is untrue. Thoth records this failure. The 42 judges murmur. Osiris, the judge, shakes his head. The verdict is guilty. And in that instant, Ammit, the devourer, lunges. As we established, she is not here to punish. She is here to annihilate. She opens her crocodile jaws, seizes the heavy heart from the scales, and devours it. This is the second death. This is the terrifying erasure of the soul. There is no hell to go to. There is no fire, no eternal torment. There is only nothing. The Bia, soul, the Ka, life force, and the Ak, spirit, are all extinguished, dissolved. The mummy, lying perfectly preserved in its distant, dark tomb, is now just an empty, meaningless doll. The name of the deceased is wiped from the records of eternity. It is as if they had never been born. Historians still debate the rigidity of this binary system. Was there any concept of a second chance or a purgatory? The overwhelming evidence of the texts says no. This was a one-time pass-fail test for your entire existence. This absolute, terrifying finality created a profound theological problem for the Egyptians. They were realists. They knew, as we know, that no human being could ever live a life of such perfect, unblemished balance. No one's heart would weigh exactly the same as the feather of truth. This means that under the rules of their own divine court, every single human being was doomed to annihilation. This was an impossible test. The system was perfect, but humanity was not. This theological crisis had to have a solution. And it did. The Book of the Dead was not just a guide. It was a book of cheat codes. The problem, as we established in Section 5, is that the test is impossible. The scales of Ma'at demand a perfection that no human life has ever contained. Under the strict rules of this divine court, every single soul who entered the Hall of Two Truths was doomed to fail. Every heart would tip the scales, and every soul would be annihilated by Ammit. This was a theological crisis, a system of judgment with a 100% failure rate. The Egyptians were not fools. They were pragmatists. They knew this, and they had a solution. The common fact, known to all Egyptologists, is that the Book of the Dead was not just a map. It was a book of powerful, effective magic, a collection of row or spells. These spells were not just prayers. They were divine, supernatural tools, words of power that could compel the gods, open sealed gates, and ward off demons. The deceased was not meant to go into this underworld empty-handed. They were meant to go in armed. This is where the case file uncovers the single most cynical and brilliant piece of evidence in this entire investigation. It is the solution to the impossible test. It is the magical cheat code. We now submit Exhibit F, the heart scarab. This is the odd, lesser-known detail that changes everything. In the wrappings of almost every mummy of consequence, placed directly over the physical heart we identified in Section 1, we find a large, beautiful amulet, often carved from green stone, in the shape of a scarab beetle. This was not just jewelry. This was a piece of magical hardware. And inscribed on its flat underside was a specific, powerful spell, spell 30B from the Book of the Dead. This spell is not a plea for mercy. It is not a confession. It is a direct, threatening, and legally binding command issued by the deceased to their own heart. We have the text. The spell begins, "O my heart, which I had from my mother, O my heart of my different ages, do not stand up against me as a witness." Let's reread that line. The deceased is addressing their own conscience, their own moral hard drive, and ordering it to stand down. It continues, "Do not oppose me in the tribunal. Do not be hostile to me in the presence of the keeper of the balance." The deceased knows their heart is full of the memories of their sins. They know that when Anubis places it on the scales, it will be heavy. They know the heart is the one true witness. And so, the spell concludes with the most chilling line, "Do not tell lies against me beside the God in the great hall." This is an unambiguous magical gag order. The deceased, standing before the 42 judges, reciting the negative confession, "I have not stolen, I have not murdered, I have not made anyone weep," is simultaneously magically threatening the star witness for the prosecution, their own heart, commanding it to remain silent, to not contradict the lies they are telling. This is divine perjury. This is an act of cosmic jury tampering. Historians still debate the true theological meaning of this act. Was this evidence of a profound cynicism at the heart of the Egyptian religion? Does this spell prove that they believed the entire trial was a magical charade, a performance that could be won with the right incantation, regardless of the life one lived? Or was it something more subtle? Perhaps they believed that the heart, being a vessel of all emotion, might be overly sensitive, that it might panic and confess to minor, insignificant sins and therefore fail the binary test. In this view, the spell wasn't a cheat code to let a murderer go free. It was a magical lawyer, a legal filter designed to calm the heart, to keep it quiet, and to ensure that a decent, if imperfect soul wasn't annihilated on a technicality. Either way, this single amulet was the most important piece of magic in the entire tomb. It was the safety net that allowed a civilization of flawed humans to face a system of perfect, unforgiving justice. They knew they were guilty, and they came prepared. The common fact that we've now established is that the Book of the Dead was an indispensable tool for the Egyptian afterlife. It was a complex collection of the spells we've investigated, from the negative confession to the heart scarab, all designed to help the soul navigate the underworld and pass the final judgment. But this is where the case file opens on its final and most human exhibit, the Book of the Dead itself. We have this image of it as a single, static, holy text, like a Bible. But this is incorrect. The odd, lesser-known detail is that there was no one Book of the Dead. It was a customizable commercial product. It was a technology of salvation. Archaeologists have found hundreds of different versions. A wealthy patron would go to a scriptorium, a workshop of scribes, and essentially commission their afterlife guide. They could pick and choose which spells they wanted included. Some versions are massive, beautiful, and filled with over 200 spells illustrated in brilliant color. Others are short, abbreviated, containing only the greatest hits, the essential spells, like our cheat code, spell 30B. This reveals a profound theological marketplace. Did you want the spell for not walking upside down, or the spell for not being eaten by a serpent? You could buy it. This was not a one-size-fits-all religion. It was an a la carte strategy for eternity, tailored to your budget. This commercialization of the afterlife, this idea that you could purchase the magic you needed, leads us to the central unanswered question of this entire case file. Historians still debate the true moral impact of this system. Did this collection of cheat codes, this magical gag order on a scarab, create a deeply cynical and corrupt society? Did the average Egyptian believe they could live a life of cruelty, theft, and arrogance, knowing that a well-funded Book of the Dead and a powerful amulet would let them lie their way past Osiris? Or, paradoxically, did the very existence of this terrifying, perfect, and inescapable judgment create a more moral society? Coda. Let's close the file. We return one last time to Exhibit A, the canopic jars, holding the liver, lungs, stomach, and intestines, and the profound, intentional absence beside them, the missing heart. We now understand why it was left behind. It was not a vessel of emotion. It was Exhibit A for the prosecution, the star witness, the one incorruptible piece of evidence. This entire case file has not been about faith. It has been about law. The Hall of Two Truths was not a church. It was a courtroom. The Book of the Dead was not a prayer book. It was a legal toolkit. The negative confession was the sworn testimony. The 42 assessors were the jury. Osiris was the judge. Thoth was the court clerk. Ammit was the annihilating sentence. And the heart scarab, spell 30B, was the magical, last-ditch legal motion to silence the witness. This is the great human paradox of the Egyptian mind. They were a civilization obsessed with ma'at, with perfect, cosmic, unyielding truth, and they were simultaneously a civilization obsessed with finding a loophole. This is not hypocrisy. It is, perhaps, the most realistic theology ever practiced. It is the profound daily recognition that the standards of the gods are perfect, but the lives of humans are not. The weighing of the heart was not just a myth, it was the engine of Egyptian morality. It was a terrifyingly literal, ever-present psychological burden. For 3,000 years, every Egyptian lived their life in the shadow of this one single question: what will your heart, the silent, perfect witness, say about you when it is placed on the scales against truth? The case is closed, but the weight of that question has never left the world, ever left the world, ever left the world.